So you want to create a real-time chat application with Next.js 13, Pusher as your WebSocket provider, Supabase as our database provider, Prisma and Tailwind CSS. Well, you have come to the right video because that's exactly what we'll build in today's video. In this video, you'll learn how client components work, how server components work, how fetching works, how server actions work, which are right now pretty new. You'll also learn how to set up Pusher, how to make the connection work, and at the end, we will debug live deployment errors since we'll face in total 3 errors. So now I think it's time to check out the demo which I have right here. And now enjoy the video and let's go. So here you see right now what we'll build today. So this is the default index page that shows if the user is not logged in. If I now sign in with GitHub right here, so I can click on this button or on the top right here, you'll see I will get redirected to the chat page, which is right here /chat. And I can write messages. So right here I can say, hey, from this demo. And if I click send right now, first of all, you will see that it will be reflected right here. Hey, from this demo, you see that the input has changed. And if I now make 2 smaller screens, you can now see that if I type a message here, hey, how are you? You'll see that this message will now be shown right here on the right tab and on the left tab. So you see real-time messaging works. It's right now in a deployed version. Also, if you type in message and send it, you see that the input changes and it's again a state where we don't have a message. Also right here, I can click on log out. And if I click on log out, you'll see that I will get directly redirected to the home page. So yeah, that's what we'll build today. I hope you enjoy it. And now let's go. So to get started, I will cd into my desktop directory and cd into my YouTube directory. And I will run npx create-next-app add latest to install the latest package of Next.js. Now the CLI will ask me for a name, so I will name it next-js-chat. I will click enter. Then I will use TypeScript, I will use ESLint, I will use Tailwind CSS. I won't use the source directory because we will use the app directory. I will use the app router, of course. I won't customize default import alias. And now I can install that. This will now take a bit, and once that's done, I will come back. Well, Next.js has now finished installing, which is great. I can now go to Visual Studio Code and open the project. And as you see, I already have opened it. And right now the project is completely empty. So what you see right now is the default template that Next.js ships with no real actual code for us. So what I want to do right now is install a few packages that we'll need for this project. So let me open the terminal right here. And now I will just paste the command and you can go to my GitHub README and just copy that. I will here install a few packages. So for example, we have Pusher.js and Pusher. We'll use Pusher to make real-time work, so WebSockets, and Pusher in that sense is a provider to make that work. Also, Pusher is way easier to use than creating your own WebSocket server since it's managed. And in that sense right here, Pusher.js is the client version and Pusher is for the server side, is a server-side package. Then we install next-auth and the prisma-adapter. We'll use next-auth to make authentication work. It's a bit harder maybe than, for example, Clerk or Auth0, but I think it has way more customization and it's also free. Then the last thing we install is Prisma Client, since we will use Prisma to query our database from Supabase. Now I can click install. This will again take a bit, so let's wait for that. Since now all of the packages are installed, we only need one more package, and that's the Prisma development dependency. So let's do an npm i-D Prisma. Right here I install Prisma as a development dependency, and that means that when we deploy our application, this will not be seen in our bundle. Also, you can see that if you open right now the package.json right here, let me open that, you see right here that we have installed Prisma as a development dependency. So now that looks great. And now we can actually start with creating our application. And now I think the first thing we will do is actually set up Prisma so that we create our database. So to start off, again, open your terminal. You can either click Command J, or you can go right here on top and click on where is the terminal and new terminal. But right now, let's go in our terminal and run npx prisma init. This will now initialize Prisma and create a schema for us. right here. So a Prisma folder with an empty schema, as you see, and an .env file right here. So now let's go to Supabase and create a database, or to say it better, we will create a Postgres SQL database. So now I'm on the Supabase website. Let me zoom out a bit. And if you didn't know what Supabase is a great alternative to Firebase. So they have, for example, a Postgres database, authentication, edge functions, real-time functionality, storage, etc. I think they are great, they are very cheap, and they are very scalable. So that's why we will use Supabase for this project. So to get started, right here, click on Dashboard or Sign In, whatever you will have to do. And then once you click that, you will get redirected to the dashboard. And now I will click right here on New Project. Then I will choose my organization. And now let's create a project. Let's name our project Next-Chat. I right here generate a password. And let me also copy that. And let's go back right here and just paste it into the .env so I don't forget the password. Then right here for the region, I will choose Frankfurt. You of course should choose whatever is nearest to you. And now I can click right here on create a new project. This will now again take a minute or so. So once that's done, I will again come back. So Supabase is now finally done initializing, and now we can get this connection string for Prisma. So right here, let's click on project settings, then let's click on database, and let's scroll down a bit. Right here you see the connection string tab. Now let's click on URI and let's copy this connection string. Right here now in the .env we have this database URL, which right now is just a demo URL. So let's delete this right here and paste what we have just copied. So right here we have the connection string for our Supabase Postgres SQL database. And as you see, it's still not finished because right here we have to pass our password. Now I already have copied it right here, as you see. So let me just change it right here and add my password. So just like that. I've deleted this password array in that sense, and I've just pasted my actual password. So now where that's added, I think we can actually get started with next-auth, so our authentication. So let's do that right now. So I'm right now on the next-auth website, which is again an open source authentication provider. It's an alternative to Auth0 and Clerk. It's free. It's maybe a bit harder to set up, but I think it's worth it. So now let's click on documentation right here, and let's click right here on adapters. Let me zoom in a bit for you. So right here adapters, let's click on that, and we will use Prisma. So let me click on Prisma. This will now redirect you to the authjs.dev website, and right here you see how to set up the prisma-adapter. So the first thing you will need is right here to scroll down to create the Prisma schema from scratch, since that's what we will do. So let me just copy this whole schema from model account to, what was the last one, to the model verification token. Just copy everything, then go to your schema. So let me open the schema and paste that inside of here. So what we have done right here is just created a schema for next-auth where all of the user stuff will be stored. So the account details, we will get the session, user, so the name, email, etc., the image. So yeah, that's what we do with this schema. We just pretty much store the user data inside of our database with this helper schema. And what we can do now actually is push our schema to Supabase so that our schema is in sync with our database. So open your terminal, and then in your terminal run npx prisma db push. This will now just push our schema to Supabase, and as you see right now, our database is now in sync with our Prisma schema, which is great. So now we are done with that, and now we can continue with creating our authentication. And to get started, let's open the Explorer right here, and then inside of the app folder, create a new folder called lib, and then inside of the lib folder, let's create a new file called auth.ts. Now inside of this auth.ts file, I will store the providers that we'll use. So next-auth has this convention with providers where you can use providers like a GitHub provider or a Google provider or Twitch provider. So whatever OAuth you want to use. And in this example, we'll use GitHub. So I think let's just start with that. So to get started, we'll have to export our options. So let's do an export const. we'll name it auth options, and this will just be an object. So let's open that. Also, since we use TypeScript, let's give it also types. So let's do a type right here, which will be next-auth options, which we import from next-auth. Also, since that's a type, let's do an import type, since I don't want to import this whole thing. So now that looks great, and I think we can get started with creating our providers. So right here, let's do in providers, and the providers is an array with the providers that we want to use. And we want to use GitHub, so let's import that. On top right here, let's do an import. Let's say GitHub, let me do it uppercase, GitHub provider, and let's do it from next-auth /providers/GitHub, just like that. And now inside of our providers array, we can use our GitHub provider. Let me spell that correctly. So now, just like that. And now inside of here, we have to pass two options actually. So first of all, the client ID, which is in string, and we have to pass a client secret, which is also a string. So right now we don't have that. So let's go to the GitHub website and generate a client secret and a client ID. So I'm right now at github.com/settings/profile, and right here we'll have to scroll down to developer settings. And then once we're on the developer settings, let's click on OAuth apps and let's create a new OAuth app right here. Now we'll have to give it an application name. So let's just say next.js-chat, or let's say it like that, right? Then we'll have to give it an homepage URL, and our homepage URL is localhost 3000. And since I don't want to misspell that, what I will do right now is go back to our code right here and let's do an npm one dev, which will start our dev server on localhost 3000 as you see right here. And that's also the URL which we'll want to use. So let me copy that and paste it right here to the homepage URL. So just like that. For the application description, I won't do anything since that's not required. And for the authorization callback URL, let me again copy the homepage URL. Then we'll add in /API/auth/callback/GitHub. Let me zoom in a bit for you guys so you can see something, just like that. So that's again the homepage, so localhost 3000 /API/auth/callback/GitHub, just like that. What you can do now is click on register application. Let me zoom out a bit again, and right here you'll get a client ID. So let me copy the client ID. Let's go back. Let me open the .env file where we store our environment variables. And now under the database URL, let me create a new environment variable and let's name it GitHub_client_ID, and let's paste the value that I've just copied. Also, we'll have to get a GitHub secret ID. So let's create an environment variable and name it GitHub_secret_ID. And for that, I will have to go back and generate a secret. So right here, click on generate a new client secret. Let me use my password and log in. And right here now you see you have now created a client secret. Now be sure that you copy this client secret since you won't be able to see it again. So now let's copy that. Let's go back and just paste it inside of here. Now we have created a client ID and a secret ID. So we can now use it right here inside of our GitHub provider. Let's first of all create the client ID. For that, let's do in process.env. The name of our client ID. So let me just copy the variable name and paste that inside of here. Also, you see right now TypeScript complains because it does not know what type client ID is. So let's give it a as string. So now you see no TypeScript error anymore. Also, let's create a client secret. So let's again do in process.env. The name of the client secret. So let me check how it's called. It's called GitHub secret ID. So let's copy that and paste that inside of here. Also, let's do an as string, just like that. So now that looks great in my opinion. So we can continue. So as I said already, we'll use Prisma. So we already created a schema as you see. And now we also have to tell next-auth that we want to use Prisma. For that, we have to use the adapter, which is prisma-adapter, which we have installed. So right above this providers array, you get an option to use the adapter right here. So the adapter will be our prisma-adapter, which we have installed from auth/prisma-adapter. And inside of here, we'll have to pass our Prisma instance. For that, we have to first create one. So let's do that. Right here, above the export const auth options, what you'll have to do is a const Prisma, which will be equal to new Prisma client. And Prisma client is imported from @Prisma client, just like that. And now that looks great. So now let's right here pass our Prisma inside of the prisma-adapter. And now that looks good. Right here you actually see we get an error, and that's a TypeScript error, and it does not know if the adapter is there or if it's undefined. I did not really know how to fix that error, and I didn't really also want to Google that since everything works. It's just a TypeScript thing. So what I will do is an //@ts -ignore, since I don't want to see this error. And now that's great, and we are actually done with this step. What we'll have to do now is actually create an API route for next-auth to make everything work with GitHub. So to do that, open your Explorer right here again, and then inside of the app folder, what we'll have to do is actually create an API folder. So let's do an API folder. Inside of the API folder, we create another folder called auth. And then inside of the auth folder, now you'll have to listen. You'll have to create this array brackets, as you see right here. So the brackets that you use in the array. And then inside of here, you'll have to do a ... next-auth, and that's all. So in folder with an array brackets and with the name ... next-auth. And then let's create this folder. And then inside of this folder, create a file called route.ts. That's the convention. How do you create API routes in Next.js? You have to create an API folder, and then inside of this API folder, you can create, of course, multiple folders as we did right here. But at the end, the API file name is always route.ts. So now where this is out of the way, let's create the API route, and that's actually very easy. All you have to do is create a handler and then export this handler. So let's do that. Let's create a constant and let's name it handler, and this will be equal to next-auth, and next-auth is imported from next-auth/next. So let's do that. And inside of here, you'll have to pass your auth options, which we have just created inside of the auth.ts file. So let me import that, and now that looks great. And now the last step is to export our handler. So let's do an export, and right here we'll have to pass our handler as a get and handler as a post, just like that. So we export our handler as a get request and as a post request. So now that looks great. We are actually done with that. And now we only have to hook up all of this authentication with our front end. And for that, we'll have to create a providers component where we then pass that to our layout function so that all routes, so all children in that sense, can get access to the session of the user. I hope you understand that. So what you'll have to do is again go in your app folder and create a new folder called components. And now inside of this components folder, I want to create a new file called providers.tsx. So let's do that. Let's name it providers.tsx. And inside of here, I will create a next-auth provider where we just, as I already said, we'll just pass the session to all of the children. So let's export our function. So let's do an export const. Let's name it next-auth provider. And this will be just equal to an arrow function right now. So let's do that right here. So now we have just created an arrow function and we named it next-auth provider. Inside of here, I want to now return a session provider. So let me just make it a bit better, just like that. And now let's return our session provider. And the session provider is imported from next-auth/react. And this, of course, has to be in brackets. I forgot that. So let's do that again, session provider, just like that. So now we have our session provider, but we are still not done because inside of the session provider, I want to wrap children. So the session provider should wrap the children inside of here. And we first of all have to get them right here through our params. So let's destructure that and let's get the children right here. Now TypeScript complains and it does not know what type children are. So let's give it a type. Children is of type React Node. So let's do children of type React Node. React Node is imported from React as you see on top, but let's change it to an import type React Node. So that looks great. And now let's just pass the children right here, just like that. Now we are done, we don't get any errors, and this looks great in my opinion. Also, before I forget, because session provider is used with state, we have to mark this component as a client component, since this will have to hydrate on the client, and that's why it's a client component. So on top, let's just do an use client just like that. And now we will have to do the last step to make everything work. To do that, let's again go right here to our Explorer and let's open the layout file. So inside of the app folder, the layout.tsx. And this is the layout file which wraps our whole application. So what I want to do right now is actually wrap our children or everything actually that is inside of this body tag with our next-auth provider so that everything can get the session. So let's do that right now. So let me just copy the children for now and delete them. And then inside of here, I want to import my next-auth provider, which lives inside of the components folder. And now let's create that. And inside of here, let me again pass the children. So what we have done right now is just we left the body element intact. Everything looks the same. All we have done is just right here wrapped our children with a next-auth provider. Also, let me also wrap the children inside of the main element. So let's do in main and right here pass the children just like that. So that looks great. And now let's test out if everything works. So let me stop again the dev server. Let me clear everything. And let me again run npm run dev. This will again restart our dev server on localhost 3000. So now let me open that. So right now you see what the default template of Next.js looks like. So that's right now the index page, and that's just the default template of Next.js. So I think the first step we'll do is actually change that and delete it. So let's go back. And right here I already see in my terminal we get a few warnings. So first of all, next-auth URL warning. Now the next-auth URL is for us not very important since we will deploy to Vercel and we don't have to add a next-auth URL. But right here the warning with no secret is important for us since right now we don't get any errors, but once we deploy our application to Vercel, if we don't add a secret, we'll get an error in production. So let's change that right now. And right now I'm again on the next-auth website, so in the documentation page. And if you click right here on options, you will see the tab for the secret. And right here you see it tells us that it's required in production. So a random string is used to hash tokens, sign encrypt cookies, and generate a cryptographic keys. So that's why we'll have to create a next-auth secret as an environment variable. So let me first of all copy this name since we'll need that. And let me open the .env file right here. So let me close my terminal and let me add it right here. Now we have to create a secret, and for that you can use OpenSSL and create right here a key. So let's do that right now. Let me copy this command right here, or just like that. Let me open my terminal, let me stop the dev server, let me clear everything, and let's run this command to create a secret for us. So now you see we have a secret created for us. So let me stop my dev server and let's just paste it right here. What you can do now is again restart the dev server. So let me clear everything and run npm run dev. And now we should not see any warning for the secret anymore and only for the URL. So now let's wait for a second and let's see what happens. So now you see we only get a warning for the next-auth URL, and as I already said, it's not important for us since we will deploy to Vercel and it's not needed there. If you want to deploy your application to Netlify, you of course have to add a next-auth URL. But now let me close my terminal and let's continue with our layout. I think the first thing I actually want to do is create a navbar. So right above the main element right here, let's create a nav element. Let me first of all style that nav element, so let's give it a class name. And let's start off with an flex, px which will be 10, py which will be 5, justify which will be between, then we'll want to have an fixed, let's also do in top which will be 0, left which will be 0, width which will be full, and bg which will be white. Then inside of this nav element, let me create an h1 tag and let's say Marshall. Let's create a span right here and say chat. Now let's check out if everything works. So let me go back and you see right here navbar, but this looks not good as again, we still have this default template and I forgot to change that. So let's do that right now. Let's again open the Explorer. Let's go right here to page.tsx, which is the index page. And let me delete everything inside of this return statement right now. And now, since everything has been deleted inside of this return statement, let's just create an h1 tag and let's say hello from the index page. Also, what I want to do is right now go right here inside of our Explorer and open the globals.css. So that's the global CSS file. And as you see, we have some default styles which I don't need. So let me delete all of them since I don't want to use them. And now we can go back. And now you see right now our nav bar and the h1 which we have created for our index page, hello from the index page, is right now behind this nav bar since the nav bar is fixed and it's pretty much overlapping. So now let's go back to our layout.tsx and let's continue styling that. So let's first of all style the h1 tag. So let me give it a class name of text which will be black, text which will be 3XL, and font which will be bold. For the span, let me also give it a class name and let's just say text which will be teal 500. I can now save that and go back, and as you see, let me first of all zoom in a bit. You see that the nav bar now looks way better, or the logo. What I want to do now is right here on the right side is check if the user has a session, and if we have a session, I want to show an image of the user and a logout button. And if the user is not logged in, so we don't have a session, I want to show a login button. So let's do that right now. To do that, go right here under your h1 tag, and before we can do anything, we first of all have to get a session. And for that, there are two possibilities. First of all, you can get the session through the client, or you can get it through the server. Now, I would always encourage you to use a server-side method to get your session, but with next-auth right now, that's not a stable thing. So what I mean is that the next-auth team does not recommend to use the get server session function in production since it's not marked as stable right now. But since we don't really right now create anything groundbreaking, I think it's okay to use. But again, if you want to create something more complex, something more production ready, definitely check out the documentation and read a bit through the get server session function and the client way to get sessions. So yeah, just do that. But now let's get our session through the server, and for that we have a handy function. So let's right here create a constant and let's name it session. And this will be equal to await get server session, which is imported from next-auth. And right here we have to pass our auth options, which we import from our lib file or our lib folder in that sense. So now let's do that. And right here we get an error and it tells me await expressions are only allowed within async functions. And yes, that's correct. So right here we want to use it as a server function. So we have to mark our export default function as async. So let's do that right here. And now we don't get this error anymore. So now we have the session. So we can now continue and create a ternary where we check if we have the session. So under the h1, let's use the ternary and let's say if session exists, let's return something. And if it does not exist, let's also return something. And now for both, let's just create a div to not get any errors. And let's just save that. And now let's first of all style the div where we have a session. So let's first of all give it a class name and let's say flex and items, which will be center. Inside of this div, as I already said, I want to show a button and the image. And right here I want to now use an image, and for that we won't use the normal image tag, but we'll use the image component from Next.js, which is almost like the normal image tag but on steroids. And this will be a self-closing tag. And inside of here we have now to pass our source. So let's give the source, and this will be session.user.image. And since right now TypeScript complains, let's say as string. Also we have to give it an alt. So let's do an alt of user profile photo. Let's also give it a class name of w12 h12 rounded, which will be full. And let's say margin right of 3, just like that. Also, we have to add in width and in height, since that's required by the image component. So let's give it a width of 500, or not 500 by 50, I'm sorry, and a height, which will also be 50. Then we can now actually save that and just test out if everything works still. And yes, everything still works, so we don't get any errors. Now, under the image component, I want to create a logout button. So let's just do for demo purposes right now a button, and let's just say logout. And right here For this div, let's change it to a button and let's say login just to see if it works. So yeah, we have this login button, so it shows right here, but this should be actually justify between. So the login button should be right here on the right corner. So let me check if I've misspelled something. Justify, well, yes, I've misspelled justify between. So let me change that and let's spell justify correctly. So now you see the login button right now is on the right side and this looks great. So what we can do now is actually change this logout button and login button to an actual styled button and make it look good. But for that, we actually have to create a new component, since this will again be a component or a button which will hydrate on the client since it will use state. So what you'll have to do is right here, open the Explorer, and then inside of the components, create a new file called buttons.tsx. Now, as I already said, we have to mark it as use client, since the buttons right here will have to use state and will have to hydrate on the client. So let's mark it as use client. And then inside of here, now let's create two buttons. So the logout button and the login button. Let's start off with the logout button. So let's for that create an export function. Let's name it logout and let me open that function. Inside of here, I want to return now a button. So let's do that. And right here, let's just style that. So let's give it a class name of flex items, which will be center, justify, which will be also center, gap, which will be 2. We will have a rounded, which will be LG, BG, which will be red of 500. We'll have a padding X of 8, a padding Y of 3. We'll also have a text, which will be center. We'll have a text, which will be small. We'll have a font, which will be semi-bold. Then we'll also have a text which will be white, ring which will be red of 300. Let's also add a transition element right here. Then let's also do a duration which will be 100. Let's do a hover which will be BG red of, let's say, 600, and a medium of text base. Now I know this is a lot of styling, but trust me, this will look good as a button. Then also we have to give it a name, so let's just say log out. So right now this is just a static button with no functionality. So let's add an on-click handler where if the user clicks on it, I want the user to sign out. And for that we'll use a handy function provided by next-auth. So let's right here use the sign out function, which we import from next-auth/react. So just like that. Now that looks great. And now let's create a login button. So let's do an export function nav login and let me open that function. Inside of here we again return a button. So let's return a button and let's create styling. Now the styling will be again the same. So let me copy the class names from the button right here from our logout button and paste them inside of here. The only thing we'll change is the colors. So instead of red, let me change it to teal. So the background will be teal 500. Hover will be teal 600 and the ring will be teal 300, just like that. And now we also have to add an on-click handler. So let's again add the on-click and we'll again use a handy function by Next.js, which is called sign in. So let me do that correctly. And sign in is imported from next-auth/react again. And inside of here, let me pass GitHub, since I want to use GitHub as my provider. And the great thing is, if I pass my provider right here directly, I will directly get redirected to GitHub and I won't get any intermediate page. Also, let me right here add the name and let's just say login, just like that. Now let's go to our layout and let's change our button of logout to our component, which is called logout. And that's imported from the components folder. And then also for the login button, let me delete this old button and let's use the component, which is called nav login. Now I think everything works. So let me go back. And as you see right here, we have the nav login button and it actually looks great in my opinion. So now we can test out if everything works. So let me click on the login button. And in theory, what we should see right now is that we get redirected to GitHub. And yes, as you see, we got redirected and it tells me to authorize next-chat. So let me click on authorize and then we should get redirected to localhost 3000. And right now we get an error. But this is not a GitHub error or an auth error. The error is only that we we have an invalid source prop for our image. So since we use the image component from Next.js, we have to configure the URL under the next.config.js file. So let's do that. Let me first of all copy the name right here, or the URL, avatars.github user content. And then what you'll have to do is right now go inside of the next.config.js file. And then right here inside of this next.config, let's do an images. And this is an object where we have the domains right here. The domains is an array with the URL. So let me paste the URL, which is avatars.github-user-content.com. Now we have to restart the dev server. So let's do an clear and let's do an npm run dev. This will now restart your dev server again on localhost 3000. And in theory, now everything should work. So let's wait for a second to restart. And as you see, we now have the logout button right here, which is red, and we have the GitHub profile image right here. So that looks great in my opinion. And now we can actually continue. So since that's now done, I think we can actually style our index page. So let me first of all close all of these tabs right here. And what I want to do now is open my Explorer again, and let's open our app folder and let's open the page.tsx, which is our index page. Let's right here delete the return statement and let me create a new return statement. Let me spell that correctly. And inside of here, let's create a div element. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of max width, which will be XL, MX, which will be auto, border, rounded, which will be LG, padding, which will be 10, margin top, which will be 32. And then inside of here, I want to create an H1 where I just say login to use chat. Let's do an exclamation mark and let's check out how it looks. So right here you see login to use chat with right here in box with a border. But I don't only want to use an H1, I also want to use this button where the user can log in. So let me first of all log out again so we see the state where everything looks like we are not logged in, and let's continue. Let me style that H1 tag first of all. So let's give it a class name of text, which will be 4XL, font, which will be semi-bold, and let's also do a text, which will be center. Then under this H1, what I will want to do now is create a div element and style it and give it a class name of margin top of 8. Let's first of all check out how the H1 looks, and yes, that looks great. And as I already said, what I want to do now is create a button underneath where the user can log in. So let's open again our components and let's go inside of the buttons.tsx file and let's again create a new function. So let's do an export function. Let's name it main login and let me open that function. Inside of here, I will actually return the same button right now. So let me just copy this return statement from our nav login and paste it inside of here. The only thing that we will change is right here, add a width of full. And now another thing I will do is instead of login, let's do a login with GitHub. And what I also want to do is now inside of the page.tsx, I of course have to import that component. So let's do a main login and that's imported from the components folder. This is a self-closing tag. Now let me save that and let's check it out. And as you see right now, we have this button which is right here, login with GitHub. You could of course now change the color or whatever you want to do, but I won't do anything since I think that looks great. So now I think the time has come to create our chat route where the users can send messages. So to do that, go again right here inside of your Explorer, inside of your app folder and create a new folder called chat. Inside of this chat folder, we have to create a file called page.tsx. Now inside of this page.tsx, we only have to export a default function. So let's do an export default function and let's name it, let me think, chat homepage. And let's just open that function now. Inside of here, let me return an H1 and let's say hello from chat, just to see if the route works. What you can do now, right here on the URL, is just do a /chat. And as you see, this loads and you see the route works also. Let me zoom in also a bit more and I think that's great. So now what can we do? I think we can now actually start styling our chat application. But before I do that, I want to implement a few safety features. So right now, even though I'm not logged in as you see right now, I can still enter this chat route. But I don't want that to happen. What I want to do is that if the user is not logged in, I don't even want to allow him to reach this route. I want to redirect him to the localhost 3000 to log in. And for that we will just do an if statement and then check if the user is logged in, and if he is logged in, we will just leave him at this route, but if not, we'll redirect to localhost 3000. And for that we'll again use the get server session, so everything works on the server side and we'll never have errors or any loading state. So let's do that right now. Let's go back and then right here above our return, we again have to get our session. So let's create a constant and name it session. This will be equal to await get server session. This is again the helper function which we import from next-auth. And then let's pass our auth options, which we import from the lib folder. Now you see we only get one error, and that's again the same error. It tells us await expressions are only allowed within async functions. And for that, we'll have to mark our function as async. So let's do an export default async function. Now we don't get any errors anymore. And what I will do now is create an if statement where I check if we have a session. So let's do an if. Let's do if the session does not exist. Let's use an helper function by Next.js, which is called redirect. And right here you see it tells me right here I can import it from next/dist, but that's the wrong import. So let me just import that manually in a second. So right here on top, what you do is an import redirect, and redirect is imported from next/navigation, just like that. And now inside of this redirect, I have to pass where I want to redirect, and this will just be the index page, so an empty slash. So now if you go back and reload the page, we should not be able to see the chat route. And if I now try to access it, so /chat, you'll see we just get instantly redirected to localhost 3000 since we don't have a session. But if I now click on login, so let me do that, you will now see in a second we now have a session since we have our image and a logout button. And if I now try to reach the route /chat, you see we don't get redirected since we have a session. What I also want to do now is if the user has a session, just like right now, I don't want him to be able to access the index page, so where we are right now. So it's actually the same again. Go to your index page, so page.tsx, and then we again just have to get our server session and again create an if statement. So let's do that. Right here above the return statement, let's do a const session. This will be equal to await get server session, and get server session is again imported from next-auth, and let's pass our auth options. Again, we have to mark our export default function as async, so let me do that. And now let's again create an if statement. So if we have a session, what I want to do is redirect the user to the chat route. So let's again use the helper function of redirect from next/navigation, and let's do an /chat. So now if we go back to localhost 3000, and if I try to reach the localhost 3000 index route, so let me delete /chat, you'll see I will get instantly redirected to /chat. So that looks great in my opinion. And what you can test out now, if I click on logout, I should again get redirected to localhost 3000. So let's do that. And yeah, you see that works. If I now click on login, I should get again redirected. And yes, this also works. So we are done with that. And now we can create our actual chat route. So let's do that right now. And this is actually pretty easy. So let me open that and then let me delete this old return statement. And let me create a new return statement. Let me spell that correctly. And let's start off with a div element. And let's give it a class name, which will be h of screen, bg, which will be gray, 200, flex, and flex, which will be call. Now, if I save that and go back, you will right now see that we have now this gray background. Let me zoom out a bit again. So we have this gray background and the nav bar on top. So now we have two options. We could first of all create this whole chat UI, so we see this message bubbles, or we could create on the bottom a form element, an input, where the user can submit a message. And I think we will start off with the form, since I think it will be much easier than to hook up this whole chat UI. So to do that, we will actually have to create a component for that, because the form component will be a client-side component, so we want to hydrate it on the client since I want to use a use ref inside of there. So again, open your Explorer, and then inside of the app folder, inside of the components folder, let's create a new file called form.tsx. Now inside of this form, since it's a client component, let's mark it as use client, just like that. And inside of here, let me just export a default function and let's name it form. Now let me just open that function, and that's great in my opinion. And now let's actually create a form. So let's do a return statement, and let's start off with the form element, and let me delete this action since I don't need it right now. Let me actually give it a class name, and the class name will be padding of 6, fixed, bottom, which will be 0, left, which will be 0, W, which will be full, and BG, which will be white, just like that. Inside of this form, I will now create a div element, and let me give it a class name, which will be flex. So let's do that. Inside of this div, I will now create an input element, and this will be text, just like that. Let's first of all save it and just see if it still works. And as you see nothing, and that's because we have to import that inside of our chat vault. So right here inside of this div, let me import our form component, which is imported from the components folder, and it's in self-closing tag. And if I now save that and go back, right here on the bottom you see in form with a pretty ugly input as you see right here. So let's style the input for now. So this is an input type text. Let's give it a name, and the name will be message. Let's give it a placeholder, and the placeholder will be type your message ... And let's also give it a class name, which will be flex of grow, padding y, which will be 2, padding x, which will be 4, and outline, which will be none, just like that. I can now save that and go back, and as you see now, the input looks way better. Now the last thing I will have to do is create a submit button, so let's do that. So under the input, create a button element, and let's just say send. If I now save that and go back, you see it right here, it's not styled, so let's style that. So first of all, let's give it a type, and the type will be in submit. Let's also give it a class name, and the class name, which will be bg teal 500, and let's say in hover of bg teal 600. Let's also give it a text of white, and padding y of 2, padding x of 4, and let's do a rounded of, I think LG will look good, so let's test out how that looks. Yeah, I think that looks good. Let's see also how maybe rounded full looks. I don't know. And yeah, I think rounded full is actually okay. Let's do a rounded full. It looks like a pill. And now that looks great. We can also check out how it looks on mobile. And yeah, I think that looks great. Now we can continue. So I think before I actually hook up the functionality, so if the user clicks on send that we see anything, I think we actually first of all have to change our schema. So I want to store the messages inside of our database, and for that I will have to create a new model, which I will call message. So let's create a new model, let's name it message, and let me open that. Let's right here give it an ID, and the ID will be of type string, @id, @default, and let me pass a UUID. Also, I want to have a message, and the message will be of type string. And what we will have to do now is create a relation between the user and the message. And this will be a one-to-many relation, since the user can have multiple messages, but each message has only one user. So that's a one-to-many relation. And it's actually quite easy to do with Prisma. So right here inside of the user model, all you have to do is give a name of message, and this will be a message of an array. Now all you have to do is click on save, and this will do everything for you, so all the hard work, and now you see that looks great. Now one thing I want to change right here, right now it references the ID, so for the user the ID, but I want to reference the email, so let's change it to email, and the field, let's change it to email, and rename the user ID right here to email. That looks better in my opinion. Also, if you want to use the same extension so that it looks like this, so formatted, go right here into the extensions table and search for Prisma, and then you can install that right here. All this does, it just adds syntax highlighting, formatting, and auto completion. So yeah, definitely install the Prisma extension right here. And now I think the last step I want to do is create an add timestamp so that we can later on order by the latest messages. So right here under the email, let's create a created add. This will be of type date time at default, and let's say now. Now the last thing is to again push our code or our schema to Supabase so that they are in sync. So open your terminal, let me stop my dev server, let me clear everything, and let's do an npx prisma-db push. This will now just push our code to our database, and as you see, our database is now in sync with Prisma. So that's great. So since we have now successfully modified our schema, I think we can now actually also right here create an action so that the user can post the data to the server, or so that we can actually post the data to the server. So to do that, open your Explorer and create a new file inside of the app folder and name it action.ts. Inside of here, first of all, we'll have to mark this file as use server. And inside of here, we'll use in server action, which is new in Next.js 13.4. And right now it's also an alpha, but I think it's a great way to create mutations. So that's why we'll use that right here. And here we have named it use server. And now we can create this function. So let's do an export async function. Let's name it post data. Let's do lowercase. And inside of here, inside of the params, I want to get form data. Let's do form data. And let's also give it a type of form data. And let me open that function right now. So an server action will always have to be marked as use server. So right here inside of this function, let's do an use server, just like that. And that's all it is. We have now created a server action. And inside of here, we can now do all of the Prisma and all of the cool stuff in that sense. So I think the first thing we'll do is just create messages inside of our database. And to do that, you have to create a constant and name it data. This will be equal to await. And now we will have to get our Prisma instance. But since we use it right now in a development environment, we have to create a global Prisma file so that we don't create any new connections. And to do that, open a new browser tab and search for Next.js best practices. And Prisma, I'm sorry, not just best practices. And then the first link you see right here is best practices Prisma client with Next.js. So you can click on that and then search right here for the solution. You can either search for that or go to my GitHub README and copy the file. But all we do right here is create a global Prisma file if we are in the development environment. And now let me go back to VS Code. Let's go inside of the app folder, inside of the lib folder, and let's create a new file called db.ts. And let me paste that file inside of here. Since we have now initialized Prisma, we can now use it inside of our action route. So let's do that. So right here, we'll have to import Prisma from our lib file or our lib folder. Then we'll have a .message.create, since we want to create a new message. Now inside of here, we have to pass our data, and I want to create a message. And the message will be we'll get it from the form data right here from the params. And to do that, you'll have to create a constant. Let's name it message. And this will be equal to form data dot get, and I want to get the message. Then inside of here, I can pass my message and mark it as string. Also, let's pass our email, and the email, I want to get it through the session. So we'll just again use the get server session and then get it through there. So right here above the message, let's do a const session. This will be equal to await get server session, which is imported from next-auth. And let's pass the auth options just like that. And then for the email, what I can do now is get a session.user.email, just like that. So now that's great. What I want to do is I want to later return this data, and I want to include the username and the image. So right under this data, let's do an include, and I want to include the user. Let me first of all do it right here. So the user, and user is capitalized. And now I want to select the name. So let's do a name of true, and let's get the image, and let's set it also to true, just like that. And now that's actually all it is. So what you can do now is actually test out if everything works. But first of all, we have to hook it up to our form. So right here we have our form.tsx. And what we'll do right now is right here in the form, let's create an action. And the action will be async. We want to get the form data through the params. So let me spell that. And then let's open an arrow function. Inside of here, I want to do now an await post data, and I want to pass the form data, which I get right here through the params. And now in theory, everything should work, and we should successfully post the data to our server. So let's test it out. Let me restart, reload everything. And as you see, our dev server is not running. So let's do an npm run dev to restart our dev server. This will restart on localhost 3000. So let's wait for that. And as you see, we don't get a successful, UI, we get an error. And it tells us to use server actions. Please enable the feature flag in Next.js config. So let's do that actually. To do that, open your next.config.js. So where is it? Right here? Let me see. Right here, next.config.js. Then we have to add our experimental flag, and we have to set server actions to true. Because as I already said, server actions are right now in alpha and they are not marked as stable. That's why you have to set them right here as true. Let's restart our dev server. So let's run npm run dev. Let me spell npm run dev correctly. This will now again restart everything, so let's wait for that. So we now again see the UI, which is great, and now we can actually test out if we get a message on Supabase. So let's say, hello, how are you? And let's click on send. And you don't see anything, but the great thing already is we don't get any error. And what we can do now is again open our terminal right here, create a new terminal tab right here, and then you can do npx prisma studio. This will open Prisma Studio, and then right here you see it loads for me in a new browser tab. So let me make it right here on top. Let me zoom in a bit, and then right here we have the messages. So you see we have the message with hello, how are you? So that looks great, and now you see we get the messages on our server or in our database in that sense. So now let me stop that again. I don't need it. And what you want to do now, I think what I want to do now is show the messages actually, so that we see them right here. And to do that, let's again go to our page. So to our route right here, where is it? Chat and page.tsx. And what I want to do now inside of here is actually show the messages. And for that, we again have to create a component, and the component will be called chat. So right here inside of the components, let's create a new file called chat.tsx. And this will be again a client component, since I want to use state. So let's mark it as use client. And then inside of here, let's export a default function. So let's do an export default function. Let's name it chat component. And let me just open that function right now. Inside of here, let me now create a return statement. So let's do a return, and let's do a div. Let me style that div. So let's give it a class name of padding 6, flex, which will be grow. Let me spell that correctly. Max height, which will be screen. Then we'll also have an overflow, which will be y of auto. Let's also do a padding y of 32. Inside of this div, I want to now create another div, and let's give it a class name of flex, which will be call, and gap, which will be 4. What I want to do now is actually map over my messages inside of this div and then show them. And to do that, I want to use state from React to store the messages inside of there. So right here above our return statement, let's do a const with total comments and set total comments. And then this will be equal to use state, which is imported from React. Now I want to set the initial state to the data which we get from our database. And for that, we first of all have to fetch that. So let's again go back to our page.tsx right here, and here we'll have to fetch the data. So what you'll have to do is go right here, let's go above our export default function, and let's create an async function, and let's name it get data. This is then function, let's open that. And inside of here, let me do a const data, which will be equal to await prisma. Prisma is imported from our lib folder, dot message dot find many. Then let me just right here select that now, and I want to select the message. So let's set it to true. I want to also get the ID, so let's set that to true. I also want to get the user, and the user is capitalized. And let me select a few things from the user. I want to get the name, so let's set that to true. And I want to get the image, so let's also set that to true. Now, again, to recap, what do I do here? I find all the messages right here. Then I select the message itself, the ID, and from the user who created the message, the name and the image, just like that. Now I also want to order the messages, so let's do an order by, and let's order by the created at date, and let's set it to ascending. Also, I only want to take the recent 50 messages, so I don't want to load all data, but only the most recent 50. So let's do an take, and let's take, let me add a comma, and let's take the 50 first messages, just like that. Now the last step is to just return the data, so let's do an return, let me spell return correctly, return data, just like that. Now the last step is to get the data in the front end, so let's do a const data, which will be equal to await get data. And now we get the data from our function right here inside of our front end. And now above this form, what I can do is first of all import our chat component from our components folder. And if I now go back to our chat component right here, and let me close the other tabs, I want to get it right here inside of our function. And for that, what I can do is actually destructure it. So let's do right here data. And now right here TypeScript complains, and it tells me data does not have any type. So let's create an interface and tell it the type. So right here, let's give it an interface. Let's name it iAppProps, and let's open that. Right here, we'll get data, and inside of the data, we'll get the user object with an image, and the image will be string or null. And then we'll also have a name, and this will be also either string or it will be null. And then the last thing we'll have is under the user, the message, and this will be of type string. Now the data right here will also be an array, so let me add the array symbol. Now right here for the data, I can set it to iAppProps, just like that. Now for the page right here, you see we get now an error for our chat component, and it tells me that I'm missing the data property. So let me add that. So right here, data will be equal to data, and let's do an as any to not get any errors. So that looks good. And then now right here, I can set my use state to initial state of data, just like that. And now that looks great. And now we can actually map over our comments. So let's do that. Right here, let's do in total comments. So let me spell that correctly. Total comments dot map. And then inside of here, I will get a message and I will get an index. And then let's just return that right here. Now the first thing I will do right now is create a div. So let's do a div element. And I will have to give it a key since I don't want any React errors. And the key will just be index. Then inside of this div, I will create another div element and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of flags and items, which will be center. Inside of here, I want to now use the image component from Next.js. So let's import that from next/image. And inside of here, I will now have to give it the source prop since I want to pass the image source. And for the source, it will just be message.user.image, and this will be as string. Also, I have to add an alt property, and let's just say profile image of user, just like that. Let's also add a class name, and the class name will just be width of 12, height of 12, object, which will be cover, and then let's say rounded LG, and margin right of 4, just like that. Also, we have to add a width, which will be 50, and a height of 50. So that looks now great. And let's test out if it works. And yes, you see the image of myself, and we only have one message, and that's also why you only see my image one time. So that looks great. And now let's also show the message. So under the image, let's create a p tag, and let's give it a class name first of all of rounded, which will be LG, BG, which will be white, padding, which will be 4, and shadow, which will be medium, and let's say self, which will be start. Let me spell self correctly, just like that. And inside of here, I want to get a message, so it will be message.message. If I now save that and go back, you now see the message right here, but this still does not look good in my opinion. So I think this should not be in p tag actually, but in div tag. And if I now save that and go back, yeah, you see this looks now way better. So that's great. And now the last thing I want to do is show on the bottom the username of the user. So to do that, actually, it's very easy. Go under this div and under the following div. And then we want to create a new p tag. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name, which will be font of light. Then I also want to give it a text, which will be small. Let's also give it a text, which will be gray of 600. And inside of here, I want to get the message.user.name, just like that. If I now save that and go back, you now see right here that I have the message, my image, and the name of the user. So that's great. Now you see actually everything works. We can now type messages and we get them right here. But the most important thing that we want to do right now, which is real time, does not work. Because if I now create a message, so let's say, hey, how are you? And click on send, you see we don't see the message right here. I have to reload it and then I only see that. That's not what I want. So yeah, let's change that. Let's now make Pusher work, our WebSocket provider. So I'm now on pusher.com, and as I already said, Pusher is a real-time provider which uses WebSockets, and in my opinion it's way easier to use than to create your own WebSocket server. It's way easier and it's also managed for you. So yeah, I would highly recommend you guys to use Pusher. You could also use, for example, Supabase, but for this video I will use Pusher. And what the first thing I will do right now is click on sign in right here. And right here tells me I can choose two products, either channels or beams. We'll use channels since this is used to build scalable real-time features, and beams is used for native programmatic push notifications. And since we create a web app with real-time features, I will need channels and not beams. So let's click right here on get started. And now it tells me the name of our app. I will just leave it the default right here. I think that's fine. For the cluster, I will leave it EU since that's the nearest to me. For the front end, I will choose right here where is it React. And for the back end, I will choose Node.js. Now I can click on create app and this will now create the app for me. Now you see right here, it gives me a quick start guide with everything we can do. But the first thing I want to do is right here, click on app keys, and it gives me the app ID, the key, the secret, and the cluster. This is what we'll need to connect to Pusher. So let me copy that actually. And now let me open the .env file. So let me find it right here and let me paste it inside of here. I want to now create environment variables for these keys. So under next-auth secret, let's create a Pusher underscore app underscore ID and let's set it equal to the app ID value, just like that. Then the next value which we'll have is the Pusher underscore secret. And let's set it equal to the secret key. So let me copy it and paste that inside of here. And then the last value which we'll need is the key. And we will access the key from the client. So that's why I will have to mark this environment variable as next. This will be uppercase next underscore public underscore pusher underscore key. And this will be equal to this key right here. So let me copy it and paste it inside of here. That's all we need. We only need the Pusher app ID, the Pusher secret, and the next underscore public Pusher key. So now that's done actually, and that looks great. And to make also this environment variables work, we have to restart our dev server. So let me stop the dev server. Let's clear everything and let's do an npm run dev, just like that. This will now restart our dev server. I can now go back to the Pusher website and click right here on getting started. This will now show me how to get started. Here you see you create a new Pusher instance with your app key and then you subscribe to the channel and bind yourself to an event and get the data from there. And that's exactly what we'll do right now. So let me just copy right here this Pusher instance. So this var Pusher, new Pusher. So where we create a new Pusher client. So now right here under our use state, let me just add what I've just copied. And again, what we do right here is we create a new Pusher instance with new Pusher. And for that, we also have to install to import Pusher. So right here on top, let's do an import. Let's import Pusher from Pusher.js, just like that. And now also we have to add an app key. And as you know, I added that right here inside of our environment variable, and it's called next public Pusher key. So let me copy the name. Let's go back. Let me delete this old app key and let's do in process.env.this next_public pusher key. Also, I have to mark it as string to not get any TypeScript errors. Also, you see the cluster is set as EU, and that's correct, so that looks good. If I now go back, the next step is to create a channel and then bind myself with an event. So let me copy this right here and add it down below. So again, what do I do right here? I create a channel, I subscribe to a channel name, it's called right here my channel, and then I bind this channel to an event which is called my event. Then I get this data right here through the function, the params. Let's set it to any to not get any errors, and then I create an alert. So what I can do now is actually test out if everything works. So right here we have this alert, so let's do that. First of all, let's reload our website to make sure everything works, and yes, that looks good. And now right here you can click on debug console, click on event creator, and let's create a new event. We have to give it a channel, and the channel name is called my channel, as you see right here. So let's add that. The event is called my event, so let me copy that and add it right here. And for the message or for the data, let's say hello from pusher. Now let me click on send event. You see event sent successfully, and if I now click on my app, you see right here an alert with hello from pusher. So our connection works. So Next.js right now successfully connects to pusher, and that's great in my opinion. So what do I do now? I think what I want to do now is actually, if I right here go to my action, so let me open my action.ts, I want to create a new pusher event and send my message. So I think let's do that right now. So inside of this action.ts, under our constant, which is called data, let's create a new pusher instance. So let's create a constant, let's name it pusher, and this will be equal to new pusher. And right here we have to add a few items. Now right here it tells me it can't find the name pusher, and that's because we have to import pusher. So right here inside of our async function, so not on top, but inside of our async function, under use server, let's do const pusher, and this will be equal to require, and I want to require pusher, and this will be in strings, just like that. And that's all we need, and you see we don't get any errors anymore. And now right here we have to add a few things. First of all, we have to add an app ID, so let me spell that correctly, and this will be equal to process.env. Let me open my .env file, the right here pusher app ID. So let me copy the name and add it right here. And let's say, and then let's do a comma. Then we have to add a key, and the key right again, let's go back and copy it. So that's right here, next_public pusher key. Then let's go back and do a process.env. The name of this pusher key. Then the next step is to add our secret. So let's again do a process.env, and let's go to our env file and copy this name, so pusher_secret. Now the last step is to add a cluster, and the cluster will be set to EU, and let's also use TLS, so use TLS, which will be uppercase, so use TLS uppercase, and then let's set it to true. That's actually all it is, and now we are done with that. We have now created a pusher instance, and now we have to also trigger the message. So right here, let's do a pusher.trigger, and we have to now pass the channel name and the event name. The channel name is called my-channel, and then we have an also event name, which will be called my-event. Let me spell event correctly, just like that. Now the last thing we have to do is add a message. So let's do a message, and the message will be equal to, we will stringify it to JSON. So let's do an uppercase JSON dot stringify. Let's pass our data. And now we have to do one interesting thing, since we now have to use turned around slashes. So right here you see the slash, but that's not the normal slash like that, but it's turned around. With a turned around /n, turned around /n. That just helps us to create later on when we want to pass our JSON to make everything look good and to make everything work. So again, I've created a message, then I JSON.stringify my data and add this two ends with this backward slash. So yeah, that's all. Also what we can do is actually change the name, since I think that's a bit hard to spell. So let me open again our page for our chat. So let's open the Explorer and then right here chat page. And let's change the name right here. Where do we have it? Nope, it's in the chat component actually. Let's change the name for my channel to chat and the event to hello. I know, weird naming, but let's leave it like that. Let's go back to the action and let's change the channel name to chat and the event to hello. So this should work actually. And then for our page again, let's go to our page right here. So our chat component actually. And what I want to do right here inside of this channel.bind, I want to get the data and set it right here to my total comments so that I can map over them. So first of all, we have to pass our comments. So let's do a const passed comments, and this will be equal to json.pass, and I will have to pass my data.message just like that. Then underneath, I will do a set total comments. I will get my previous comments, and then I will right here spread over my old comments and give it my new past comments. So just like that. And in theory, everything should work now. So let me reload everything. Yes, that looks good. And let's create a message. So let's say, hello, how are you? And let's click on send. And yes, we see it right here. But if I create a few messages, so let's say this, and let's create another message, just like that. You see, if I now reload this page, I'm always right here on the top. So I always see the old messages and I have to scroll down to see all of the new messages. But I don't want it to be like that. I want, if I reload this page or if I create a new message, that our chat application scrolls automatically to the bottom. And that's actually pretty easy to do. So let's do that. Under this const total comments, we will have to create a ref. So let's create a const message and ref. This will be equal to use ref, and use ref is imported from React, and let's set it to null. Also, we have to add a generic to not get any errors, and a generic will be called HTML input element, just like that. And that's all we do. We create a ref, which we name what here message and ref, and we set the initial state to null. What we have to do now is create a function, which we'll call scroll to bottom, where the user just will be scrolled to the bottom. So let's do a const, let's name it scroll to bottom, and this will be equal to an arrow function. What I want to do now inside of here is get a message and ref dot current dot scroll into view, and I have to add the behavior, and the behavior will just be smooth, just like that. And now I have to add a use effect, and every time we get a new message, so a new total comment, I want to make this function work. And for that, you use a use effect. So let's do a use effect. This is imported from React. And let me configure that. Inside of here, we will use a dependency array, and the dependency array will be total comments. So all this does is it tells the use effect to always rerun when the total comments array changes, so when we have a new message. And then in the use effect, all I have to do is add scroll to bottom. So I call the function. Now, this is still not done. One thing is still needed. So under this total comments mapping, so under this right here, I only have to add a div and pass the ref, and the ref will be called message and ref, so which I've created on top. And now in theory, that's all. So if I now reload this page, you see I get scrolled to the bottom. And if I create a new message, hey, do I get scrolled to the bottom? I should see that. So let's click it, and yes, you saw I got scrolled to the bottom. So that looks great. Another thing I don't like right now is that I see right here this text. So even though I click on send, the message right here does not clear for me. I still see it in the input. So let's change that. That's again very easy. You again have to use a form and use ref, I'm sorry. So let's go into the form component right here. And then above the return statement, let's create a new constant and let's name it form ref. This will be equal to use ref, and that's imported from React. And this initial state will be null. Again, I will have to add a generic to prevent any errors, so TypeScript errors. And let's do HTML form element, just like that. And now, again, that's very easy. For the form element, you have to add a ref, and the ref will just be the form ref. So let's add that. And now we only have to do one thing. And that's very easy. Inside of this action, what I want to do is once I post the data, so once I call this function to post my data, I want to reset the form. So under this await post data, I just do in form ref.current.reset. That's all actually. So if I now test it out actually and say, hey, does this reset, and click on send, you will see it does reset and we see the message right here. Isn't that great? I mean, I think that's great. Everything works now. We can log in, we can log out. So let me click on log out. Let's see if everything works. This takes a bit. Yes, we got logged out. I can now click on log in. So let's do that. I should now get redirected to the chat route. Yes, and it scrolls down to the bottom. So guys, right now you see I've created a few more messages, and that's because already 1 day has passed. And I already told you everything works. So we can send messages and the user input is being deleted. And when we reload the page, you see right here that we get automatically scrolled to the bottom, which works great. But the actual thing which we want to create, which is real time, does work, but does not 100% work. Let me show you. And you probably also already saw that, but I didn't talk about that. First of all, let me open a second tab right here, localhost 3000. Let me make this one a bit smaller. So just like that. Give me a second. So now you will see a few things. Let me create a message. Let's say, hey, how are you? And let's send that. So we see it right here and we see it right here. So real-time works in theory, right? But not quite. Let me show you what I mean. I will send now another message and say again, hey, does this still work? ? And I will click send. And now something weird happens, right? We don't get one message back, but we get 2 messages back with the same message. That's not what we want, right? And I can show it to you again. I will say it again. Hey, does this now work? ? And if I click now send, I now see it 3 times or actually 4 times. So what happens? Well, the problem is we don't want a cleanup function actually. So we have to unsubscribe from this pusher subscription. So what you have to do right now is go back to your chat component. So right here, our chat component. And we have to wrap everything right here. So this whole pusher logic, we have to wrap everything in a use effect. And then inside of this use effect, we have to unsubscribe from the event stream or from the WebSocket stream, whatever. So what you will do right now is copy right here everything which is has something to do with pusher. So where we subscribe to pusher, where we bind our channel to an event, and where we create a new instance. Let's copy that right here. Let's create a new use effect instance right here. So let me do that. This right here will have an empty dependency, so it will run once our site loads. And inside of here, let me just paste the code again. So everything we had, I just pasted it back. And now comes the interesting or the important thing, which is to unsubscribe from our WebSocket stream or from our data stream. And to do that, we'll have to return a new function right here. So let me return a new arrow function. And inside of here, I will just have to do pusher.unsubscribe, and I have to unsubscribe from the channel name, which is chat. So let me copy that, paste that inside of here, and that's all we do. We wrap our code inside of a use effect, and at the end, we just unsubscribe from our pusher web stream. So now we can check out if everything works. My dev server still works, so let's go to localhost 3000 again. Let me reload both sites right here. And now let's test out if everything works. I will right here say, does the first message come to you? ? And let's click send. And yeah, we see it right here. Now let's again type a message and check out if we only get one message or if we get a duplicate message, so that we don't correctly unsubscribe from the stream. So let's say, hey, does this still work correctly? ? And let's click send. And let's see. Yeah, it works. I can again type something, send. Yeah, it totally works now. So that's great. That's exactly what I wanted, and it now completely works. And I think the time has now finally come to deploy our application. So first of all, we have to push our code to GitHub and then deploy to Vercel. So let's do that right now. But now, before I deploy my application, actually, I will have to do 2 things. First of all, right here, as you see, we have created an environment variable. And I haven't added this environment variable to git ignore. That means if I now deploy my code to GitHub, it will deploy my environment variables and all secrets I've stored in there, and I don't want to do that. So go into your git ignore, and under this .env local, let's just add .env, just like that. And then there's another thing. So right now, right here in the chat, you see that we get our data, where is it, on here on top, from our chat page. So let me open that chat page right here. So right here you see we fetch it from Prisma, which is okay, it's great. But if you're new to Next.js, you will probably know that Next.js caches server components indefinitely. That means right now, the first message that I will make to Prisma will get fresh data, but each subsequent request that I will make will get cached or stale data. That means that I will just not see the most recent messages. And I don't want that, of course. I want to always get the most recent messages, since that's in live application, and that's also the whole idea behind that. And to make that work for Next.js, right here I'm in the docs website. Let me zoom in a bit. You'll have to add a cache segment, and you will have to tell it that you want your force dynamic. All this does right now is just tell Next.js that you don't want to cache the site at all, so there will be no cache, and the site will always be dynamic. So I will just copy this right here. So export const dynamic, which equals to force dynamic. And then above my export default page right here in my chat homepage, I will just paste that above here. So I export right here dynamic, and I force the site to be dynamic. If you want to know more about that, I would highly suggest you guys to read through the site. It will explain a lot to you. But yeah, that's what we'll do. We will just force dynamic right now. And since we have now that off the way, there's one last thing. If I open my terminal right now, I've already cleared it. Oh no, I haven't actually. That's great. Let's scroll up a bit. Do I see it? Nope, I don't see it anymore. But I got an error where it told me that I already have like 10 Prisma clients running or something like that. And the error is actually, if I go to my lib folder and inside of auth.ts, right here we have Prisma, and right here just create a new Prisma client. But as I already told you, of course, in development environment, you shouldn't do that. You should use a global Prisma file. So instead of doing this right here, let me delete that, and I will just get Prisma right here. Let me delete this also on top. I will just get Prisma right now from our lib file, so from our db file, where we already have created our Prisma client and where we check if we are in a development environment or in a production environment. So now that's great. I think that's all we need. I think we are ready to deploy. So yeah, let's go. So to do that, I went to github.com/new to create a new repository. Right now I have to give it a name. So let's say next chat YouTube. Then I will make it public, and I will just create a repository right now. GitHub will now give me instructions how to push my code right here to GitHub. So let's do that. Right here in your terminal, the first thing you'll do is in git init. This will initialize a new Git repository for you. Then you will do in git add everything. So git add dot. This will just add everything. Then the next step is to commit your first message. So let me copy that, paste that. And for the commit message, let's just say finished website, just like that. Then I can click enter. Then the next step, as you see right here, is to create a branch. So let me copy that and paste that. Then the next step is to add a remote origin. So I will copy that and paste that. And then the last step is to push our code. So I will copy that and paste that. This will now push our code to GitHub. And if I now reload right here my GitHub, you'll see the code right here. So that looks great in my opinion. And as you see also, we don't have any .env files, so we don't leak any secrets. And now I think it's time to deploy our application to Vercel. So let's go to Vercel. So now I'm at vercel.com/new, and right here I can import my repository and deploy it. So right here we have the name next-chat-YouTube. So let me click on import. And as you see, it already has the framework preset for me. And the only thing I have to do is add environment variables. So to do that, go to your project and just copy your environment variables. That's exactly what I'll do right now. And I will just paste them inside of here. That's all. Now you will only have to click on deploy, and Vercel will do all of the hard lifting for you, and you'll just have to wait. But I already know we'll get an error, so let's wait for the error. So as I said, we got an error, and as you see we can click here to learn more, and all it tells us right here is that Prisma has detected that this project was built on Vercel, which caches dependencies. This leads to an outdated Prisma because Prisma's auto generation isn't triggered. So right here you can click on learn more, so that's exactly what I will do right now, and let's see what it tells us. And right here we have a solution, and the solution is to add a custom post install script, and this is also the preferred method as it's a universal solution. And all it does is just at build time it will run Prisma generate. So let me copy the script, so this post install script. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's open the package.json, and now under right here lint, so next lint, let's just add this script. So even though you would think we're now done, we're actually not done, because there's one more thing that's right now not perfect. So if you go to our action.ts, so let me click on that, you see right here we do pusher.trigger. And in the development environment, as you have seen, everything worked. But if we now deploy to Vercel, we will get an error. And the problem will be that the serverless function, so the lambda, will just stop before it can even right here reach pusher.trigger. And to prevent that, so that the lambda will live long enough to send this trigger or to trigger a new message, you will have to add right here await pusher.trigger. And with that I circumstance the problem where our lambda will just stop way too early and not trigger a new message. So yeah, I hope you understand that. And now I can again open my terminal, click git add everything with a dot, and then just do in git commit -m and say, what do I say? Edit post install script. Yeah, that's all. And let's click enter, and let's do in git push. This will now push my code to GitHub. Then that also means that Vercel will automatically rebuild my application. So let's go to Vercel right now. So right here you see it's right here building right now, and as you see it's also automatically building. I haven't done anything, and in theory everything should work now, and we should now have a successful deployment. So let's wait for that. So now you see we have a successful deployment. So let me go back right here and then project, and let me click right here on the URL Next Chat YouTube. Let me zoom in a bit for you guys so you can see something. And I think we'll get an error right now. If I now click on login with GitHub, let's see, yep, we get an error. And the error is that it's right here routes us to localhost 3000. This shouldn't be right. We have a new URL right here, next-chat-youtube.vercel.app. And the error is that we have to tell GitHub that we have a new URL. So let's go to GitHub. So I am back at the GitHub developers page for our OAuth apps. And now let's click on Next.js chat right here. And you will see right here we have my homepage URL and my authorization callback URL. And right here you see it points to localhost 3000. But as you know, we have a new URL which is called next-chat-youtube, or that's at least for me, you'll have a different URL. What I can do now is actually just copy this URL right here, go back to GitHub, and then instead of localhost 3000, I will delete it and paste what I've just copied. And the same also for the authorization callback URL. I will delete it and paste my new URL. I can now click on update application. This will update everything automatically for me. And if I now go back to my website, reload everything, in theory, again, it should work. So let me click on login with GitHub, and it loads. Let's see. And yes, it works perfectly. So I think the time has now come to see if real-time works in a deployed state. And for that, let me make my screen smaller a bit. Let me duplicate this right here. Let's open it right here. Let me copy that, paste that. And now let's test it out. I will now create a message right here. Let's say, hey, from the deployed version. Now, if I click send right now, the first message will take a bit of time. And that's because the lambda, so the serverless function, has to first of all start off. So cold start. If you're not too new to Vercel, you will probably already know that. But as you see now, if I click on send, this takes a bit. Now the serverless function has finally started. And as you see, we now see the message here and here. I can type a new message. So I can say, hey, does this still work? And if I now click send, you will see that we have it right here and right here. I can also type from this tab right here. So let's say, hey, how are you? Oh my God, let's spell that correctly. And if I click send, let's see, I see it right here and right here. And you saw it right now 2 times. That's because I clicked 2 times. But yeah, it works. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you could learn a lot. And I hope I will see you in the next video. But now, enjoy your day and bye.